Hello, students. Welcome back. Let us start again with the chapter packing and have a quick recap of what we have already done. So, in the chapter packing, we have read that the narrator and his two friends, George and Harris, they decided to go on a holiday trip. And for that, they together come to the house of the narrator, and there they start packing. So the narrator, he offered to do the packing. The narrator felt pride in his ability to do the packing. George and Harris, they happily agreed to the narrator's proposal. But the narrator's intention was that his friends would not let him do the packing. Instead, they would do the packing and he would get a chance to boss over them. But he was a little irritated when he saw both of them relaxing. The narrator, he starts with the packing. And when he was about to close the bag, Harris reminded him of whether he has packed his boots in, that he had forgotten to pack the boots in. The narrator realized that yes, he had forgotten to put the boots inside. George started laughing in an unusual manner, and this irritated the narrator very much. So he opened the bag again and put the boots in. Suddenly, he was reminded whether he had put the toothbrush in or not. He turned everything out of the bag but could not find his toothbrush. He found George's and Harris's toothbrush 18 times, but he could not find his own. And then finally, when he started putting the things back into the bag, and while shaking it, he found his toothbrush inside a boot. And thus, the narrator, he repacked the things and he was done. So now we will start from here, paragraph number 7. When I had finished, George asked if the soap was in. I said I didn't care a hang whether the soap was in or whether it wasn't. I slammed the bag shut and strapped it and found that I had packed my spectacles in it and had to reopen it. I got shut up finally at 10:05 p.m. and then there remained the hampers to do. Harris said that we should be wanting to start in less than 12 hours' time and thought that he and George had better do the rest. And I agreed and sat down and they had a go. Now, here, the word didn't care a hang means showing no concern or interest. Slammed means shutting the lid forcefully. Uh, and hampers here refers to the basket which is used to carry foods and utensils. So now, when Jerome he closed the bag, George asked him if the soap was there inside. Jerome he was little impatient now, and he replied that he was not concerned if it was there or not, and he closed the lid and strapped the bag. Then he realized that he had packed his spectacle in it too and had to open it again to get them. Finally, he was done with with the packing at 10:05 p.m. And then they had to pack the food basket. The hampers were still left. And Harris came up with the suggestion that they were left with less than 12 hours to leave, so they should do the rest of the packing. So he offered to pack the hampers. And thus, Harris decided the food baskets would be packed by them, that is, him and George, and Jerome agreed to take his turn for some rest while his friends packed the basket. They began in a light-hearted spirit. Light-hearted spirit means in a very cheerful manner, evidently intending to show me how to do it. Evidently means clearly, obviously, trying to show Jerome that how to do the packing. Here, how to do it, it refers to the packing. So they began in a light-hearted spirit, evidently intending to show me how to do it. I made no comment. I only waited. With the exception of George, and Harris is the worst packer in the world. And I looked at the piles of plates and cups and kettles and bottles and jars and pies and stoves and cakes and tomatoes, etc., and felt that the thing would soon become exciting. So, as the suggestion was given by Harris that he and George should start packing the hampers, the narrator also readily agreed. He was excessively tired and he had taken a long time to pack just one bag, and they had to leave very soon in the morning. So that's why he agreed. And thus, George and Harris, they started packing the hampers in a very happy mood. They wanted to show Jerome that they could pack well. Jerome waited for them to create a mess. He was waiting. He knew that how they would begin packing. He considered Harris to be the worst packer in the world. He says that if you keep George aside, if you just remove George from this world, you will find Harris being the worst packer in the world. He thought that as the boys would mess up, it would be an interesting thing to watch because there were a lot of things to be packed. And you can see in the pictures a lot of things there on the table. There were a number of things: cakes, tomatoes, pies, stoves, kettle, bottles, jars, etc. Everything was to be packed by George and Harris, and thus they were going to create a mess, and narrator was waiting for that excitement. The narrator said it did. They started with breaking a cup. That was the first thing they did. And they did that just to show you that what they could do and to get you interested. So the scene became interesting as they broke a cup at the start. When they started packing things, they broke the cup. Jerome says that they broke the cup to indicate that they could do that too and to make things interesting. It was just to make you feel that a lot of excitement was waiting then. Then Harris packed the strawberry jam on top of tomato and squashed it. And they had to pick out the tomato with a spoon. Squash means to crush, to squeeze something with force so that it becomes flat, soft, out of the shape. So Harris, he had placed the jar of strawberry jam on top of the tomatoes. The tomatoes were squeezed by the jar, and then they removed the damaged tomato with the help of a spoon, a teaspoon. And then it was George's turn. He trod on the butter. I didn't say anything, but I came over and sat on the edge of the table and watched them. As you can see in the picture, here George, he has trod on the butter. उसके पैर में butter चिपक चुका है. It irritated them more than anything I could have. Just excuse me. Yes, yes. So it irritated them more than anything I could have, and said, I felt that it made them nervous and excited, and they stepped on things and put things behind them, and then couldn't find them when they wanted them. And they packed the pies at the bottom and put heavy things on top and smashed the pies in. Trod on means to step on. So next it was turn of George. He had stepped on the butter. Jerome remained silent but sat on the edge of the table to watch the action which was going on there, and his silence irritated his friends. They became nervous and they started stepping on the things. They started creating a mess after one after the other. They kept the things behind them, and then later, when they wanted them, they could not find them. They placed the pie on bottom again, the way they had squashed the tomato, and they kept heavier things on them, which smashed the pies. So they had started creating the chaos while packing the hampers. They upset salt over everything, and as for the butter, I never saw two men do more with 1 and 2 pence worth of butter in my whole life than they did. After George had got it off his slipper, they tried to put it in the kettle. It wouldn't go in, and what was in wouldn't come out. They did scrape it out at last and put it down on a chair, and Harris sat on it and it stuck to him. And they went looking for it all over the room. So, here, see the situation. Upset the salt means overturn the salt over thin. Scrape means to scratch and pull. So these two friends, they overturned the can of salt on everything. Jerome says that they created a lot of confusion with the small piece of butter. एक cheap substance के साथ the way they had created a mess, it was really exciting and humorous. He had not seen anyone create so much mess with the butter that was worth 1 and 2 pence, meaning it was very small piece of the butter, quite cheaper one. But what they did, it was really humorous. George removed it from his slipper and then tried to put it into the kettle. They tried to put it into the kettle, and as he was unable to do that, he it was stuck there. And what was stuck, it was not coming out. Then somehow they managed to take out the butter from the kettle and they placed it on a chair, and Harris, he sat on it and the butter got stuck to him. He stood up and both the boys went around the room looking for the piece of butter. They were shocked, they were surprised that a little moment later the butter was on the chair and now they could not find it. I'll take my oath. I put it down on that chair, said George, staring at the empty seat. I saw you do it myself not a minute ago, said Harris. So take my oath means to swear upon something. Kasam khana. George looked intently at the empty seat and on which he had placed the butter a few minutes ago. जिस सीट पर उसने वो बटर रखा था वो उसे ध्यान से देख रहा था. He was looking intently at it. He took an oath of truthfulness that he had placed it there not even a minute ago, and Harris supported him. Then they started round the room again looking for it, and then they met again in the center and stared at one another. So they started looking for the butter, searching it in the room. They met in the middle of the room, empty handed. They were surprised and said, "Most extraordinary thing I have ever heard of," George said. "So mysterious," said Harris. And then George got round at the back of Harris and saw it. "Why, here it is all the time," he exclaimed indignantly. Indignantly means a manner indicating anger. He was a little annoyed, looking the butter everywhere in the room. And finally he found it. It was stuck at the back of Harris. "Where?" cried Harris, spinning round. "Stand still, can't you?" roared George, flying after him. And they got it off and packed it in the teapot. So George said that the disappearance of the butter was the most amazing thing that he had known. Harry said that yes, this disappearance was a mystery. George saw the butter sticking to Harris's back and said that it had been there all this while. Harris turned around asking where it was. George flew to Harris's back and he asked him to stand still because he wanted to remove the butter from his back. So finally, they removed it and they packed it inside a teapot. Montmorency was in it all, of course. Montmorency. Montmorency is the pet dog of the narrator Jerome. The narrator says that Montmorency's ambition in life is to get in the way and be sworn at. If he can squirm in anywhere where he particularly is not wanted, and be a perfect nuisance and make people mad and have things thrown at his head, then he feels his day had not been wasted. So here the narrator introduces the fourth member, and it is the dog of the narrator. Be sworn at means getting scolded. Squirm means to wriggle, to twist one's body, to get into the way of the people and creating nuisance, causing inconvenience to the people. So Jerome's pet dog Montmorency also participated in the event of packing. Narrator says that his aim was to interrupt everyone and then get scolded for it. He also adds that if Montmorency was able to twist into a place, get into people's way, and create nuisance by angering them and get things thrown at him in return, he felt that his day had not been wasted. It had been utilized in a good way. But abhi itna hi nahi hai. To get somebody to stumble over and curse him steadily for an hour is his highest aim and object. And when he has succeeded in accomplishing this, his conceit becomes quite unbearable. The conceit means here his pride in himself. So here, the narrator says that Montmorency's aim was to get people trip over him, tumble them over, उनको लड़खड़ा कर गिरा देना, and then उनसे डांट खाना, get scolded from them. And by doing this, he felt that he had fulfilled his aim and he would feel proud of this achievement. So Montmorency was also everywhere, present everywhere, while George and Harris they were packing the hampers. He came and sat down on things just when they were wanted to be packed, and he labored under the fixed belief that whenever Harris or George reached out their hand for anything, it was his cold, damp nose that they wanted. He put his leg into the jam and he worried the teaspoons and he pretended that the lemons were rats and got into the hamper and killed three of them. So, Harris could land him, three of them before Harris could land him with the frying pan. So Montmorency he sat on the things to be packed. He thought that when George and Harris reached out for the things to be packed, they were actually reaching out his cold, wet nose because he was everywhere, poking his nose everywhere. And thus he would bring forward his face whenever they were out to reach something, they would just get his cold, wet nose. He stepped into the jam bottle, he shook the teaspoons, he worried, disturbed the teaspoons, and he acted as if the lemons were rat. And he stepped into the hamper and he killed three of the rat. That means he destroyed the lemons also. And he was stopped by Harris, who tried to hit him with the frying pan. Harris said that I encouraged him. I didn't encourage him. A dog like that doesn't want any encouragement. It's the natural origin sin that is born in him that makes him do things like that. So Harris blamed Jerome, the narrator, for encouraging Montmorency for doing all this mischief. Jerome says that a dog like Montmorency did not need encouragement. It was born to be like that and act like that. So it is his natural origin sin. It is the natural talent in him that he comes in the way of people and disturbs them. Finally, the packing was done at 12:50 and Harris sat on the big hamper and said he hoped nothing would be found broken. George said if anything was broken, it was broken, which reflection seemed to comfort him. He also said he was ready for bed. We were all ready for bed. Harris was to sleep with us that night, and we went upstairs. The word reflection here means thought. So finally they had completed the whole packing at 12:50 in the night and Harris sat on the big hamper. He was totally tired and they hoped that nothing would be found broken. And this thought that even if something was broken, it was let it be, because he was now so tired that he did not want to bother about the broken things in the baggage now. So he was quite having an indifferent attitude at that moment. He did not want to bother about the hamper now, and said that if something broke, it would not matter. So they were ready for the bed and they went upstairs to sleep. Sorry. We tossed for bed and Harris had to sleep with me. He said, "Do you prefer the inside or outside?" "Outside, Jay." I said I generally preferred to sleep inside a bed. Harris said it was odd. George said, "What time shall I wake you fellows?" Harris said 7. I said no, 6, because I wanted to write some letters. Tossed over the bed means throwing something somewhere lightly. So they all dropped over the bed. They were just excessively tired. So they settled in their bed. And Harris, he asked Jerome if he preferred the inside part of the bed or the outside of the bed. So many people, they like sleeping towards the corner of the bed, the outside edge of the bed. Some like sleeping inside. So Harris, he asked Jerome about the preference where he would like to sleep. Jerome said that he preferred to sleep on the inside, and this seemed strange to Harris. George asked them that he should wake them up at what time. Harris replied 7, while Jerome wanted to wake up at 6 as he had to write some letters. Harris and I had a bit of row over it. Row means a little bit of fight, difference in the opinion, but at last split the difference and said 6:30. Wake us up at 6:30, George said. George made no answer, and we found on going over that he had been asleep for some time. So we placed the bathtub where he could tumble into on getting out in the morning and went to bed ourselves. So Harris and George, they had a discussion on the time, and finally they settled on 6:30, each accommodating his time by half an hour. And thus, when they asked about George about the opinion, he did not respond as he was already asleep. So Harrison George made mischief by placing the bathtub next. Harris and Jerome, they played a mischief by placing the bathtub next to George's bed so that he would fall into out as he would wake up in the morning. So thus they ended the day also by making a mischief and placing the bathtub near the bedside of George. So thus here we find the lesson ending at a point where we find that finally the three friends, they were able to pack their bag and they were ready for the next morning, and they go to sleep. So hope you have enjoyed the reading of the text, and in the next session we will be discussing the question answers. Thank you all. Have a nice day. Thank you.